For in him we live and move and have our being. For in him we live and move and have our being. Are you familiar with this phrase? I grew up with this beautiful line peppered throughout the prayers of my church community, a part of our shared language of faith. I love it. It speaks powerfully to me of our relationship with the divine, in whom we live and move and have our being. Jesus in the gospel today talks about God abiding in us. But in these words from Acts, we hear that we also abide in God. We are surrounded by and find life in the divine. However, this is not a Paul original. The author of Acts has Paul quoting this line. But from where? Is this one of the sayings of Jesus? Is it something Paul wrote somewhere else in a letter? It sort of sounds like it might be from one of the Psalms. Nope, none of the above. In the story, Paul says, "For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said." Who is Paul talking to here? Paul is addressing the residents of Athens, Athenians, Greeks, not Jews, a people who were incredibly different from Paul culturally, ideologically, religiously. So in speaking to the Athenians about God, Paul refers to their own tradition. In this case, Epimenides' Critica, a poem addressed to Zeus that had been written centuries before, but which resonated for Paul in his experience of the divine. For in him we live and move and have our being. Words that are from somewhere else, but stuck. In the part of the story that comes just before the passage we heard today, it says that Paul was distressed that Athens was full of idols. And of course he was. He was a follower of Jesus, but also a Jew, and idols were expressly forbidden in his tradition. He would have had a strong religious and cultural distaste of them. However, encountering these people who were different from him, he does not root this interaction in his distaste or distress, even though he makes an argument against idols, but instead in what they have in common. And for Paul, this is their shared identity as God's offspring. That's what he says. A quote from another Greek writer. Each of them, Jew and Greek, were created by the maker of heaven and earth. And Paul finds something beautiful and true and resonant in this different tradition to help him express this. For in him we live and move and have our being. For Paul, his attitude is clearly not that he is bringing God to this place or these people, but rather he is working under the assumption that God is already there. Not only is God there, but in Paul's mind, God is already connected in relationship with these people. And Paul draws on a connection to the presence in Athens of an altar to an unknown God. Fundamentally, they are connected to God and connected to Paul because we are God's offspring. We are. Paul invites the Athenians to lean into and embrace this relationship with God, whom they might even already know, through whom they already live and move and have their being. Paul invites them to experience a liberating and radical transformation of life that he himself had already encountered. I think this story is actually quite incredible and demonstrates a level of open-mindedness, humility, respect, and compassion in Paul's missionary activity among those who were different from him. This calls us, I believe, to reflect on how we meet those who are different from us, especially those who come from different cultures, traditions, and faiths. The scriptures are not of one mind when it comes to how to relate to those who are different. Neither has the history and teachings of the church always been consistent. And Christians have had an unfortunate tendency, when encountering those who are from different cultures, traditions, or faiths, to act in ways that were dismissive, cruel, prejudiced, and oppressive. Very different, I think, than our story from Acts today. There has often been little effort to see what is beautiful and true and resonant in different traditions and different ways of being. There has often been the absence of an attitude that would treat those who are different as God's offspring as well, created by a common maker. There's often been a failure to act under the assumption that God already might be in a place or with a people, that God might already have a relationship with each one. We do not need to compromise who we are or what we believe. We do not need to stop our charge to evangelize, to make that invitations into the water of new life, into the liberating and transformative way of being with each other and with God. However, I think hearing this story, we need to remember to be open-minded, to practice humility, respect, and compassion, to always look with curious eyes. Without this, we would not have this short, beautiful piece of theology in the phrasebook of our faith. In him we live and move and have our being. I wonder what it would be like if we approached everyone, especially those who were different from us, as if they had God abiding in them and they in God. I wonder what it would be like if we approached others as fellow offspring of God. I wonder what it would be like if we always had the attitude that God is already present, already working, already building relationships wherever we go. I wonder. I hope you wonder about that this week, and maybe even try it out, because I think that the results might be beautiful. I think that it might be compelling. I think it might just be needed, both for ourselves and for others, so that we may even more fully in God live and move and have our being.